What's up, sis?
I guess it was kind of a weird match, but I guess he kind of proved the naysayers wrong. I think what Cronin has demonstrated here is that he knows exactly what an Evil Dead film should be. He strikes a balance between the horror and the comedy that hasn't been seen since the second film in the series. Evil Dead Rise sort of injects everything that this series needed to be reinvigorated. It's got a new unique setting. It has a tenuous connection to the older films that doesn't rely too much on nostalgia. It's got plenty of unique gore and characters.
I'm visiting my mother tomorrow. Do you ever wish that she was dead?
There's just boundless vision here. Obviously, it's undeniable, and it takes the audience. It makes you think you're at the brink of transcendence. You're about to have some epiphany, like something amazing is going to happen to your worldview very soon, and then instead your head just gets shoved up Ari Aster's ass, so he could fart even more directly, into your respiratory system, and then, eventually into your brain. Because, this movie's destined to divide. It's going to stand apart from anything Aster made before it. It's going to, stand apart from anything he makes after. Because I don't think he's going to be allowed to go as ham as he does here. Because he goes a little too hard in the paint. A lot about what this thing is exploring that is relatable. But does this make a good movie? Not really. It's not a narrative. This is just a nightmare. A drawn out, bad night at home. After you ate too much right before you went to bed and watched Evil Dead Rise, you go to sleep with all of your fucked up shit rattling around in your brain, and if you're Ari Aster, this is what you wake up and poop out onto the page.
Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, and that is Chuck, and this is episode 5. We may be a couple weeks early, but today we're throwing our own Mother's Day and talking all things motherhood. And to tackle such a big topic, we could only do a double episode. So we're bringing you twice the featured reviews in this one episode. First up, we've got Evil Dead Rise. It's all about the fears of becoming a first-time mom and the blood and guts that come along with that. Next up, we've got Beau is Afraid, where we'll talk about the domineering nature of some mothers and their Greek tragedy-esque ability to turn their boys into sniveling man-children. And of course, we've got the watch list, which won't be left out, where we'll be discussing Amazon's adaptation of Dead Ringers. It's a show all about the miracle of childbirth that'll give you all the mucus plugs that you can handle. We've even got a little something for all the adoptive fathers out there, where we'll discuss the finale of The Mandalorian. And as always, we're going to discuss the week's film news. We'll talk about the one non-film recommendation in the Mentionable that we have, and we'll name our favorite film or show that we watched this week in Pick of the Week. Timestamps are in the episode description. Please like and subscribe if you like what you see, and rate the show on podcast services if you like what you hear. But anyway, that's the business end of the show. Chuck, why don't you take it from here?
Yeah, because that's something that occurred to me as I was getting the show ready. It was just like, holy shit, everything's connected. Synchronicity everywhere. It's all about the same thing. And I don't really feel like this is a sign of homogeneity. It's just, everything just slides together just perfectly. And I don't know. This first news story we're going to talk about is kind of about mankind forcing, exerting some control over something that should be up to the muses, according to, most people. Traditionally, that was the thought. But now we are headed towards, the land of affirmation. We are getting the Brave New World. The diversity, inclusion, and equity rules are in place. I ordered them specifically that way because they initially rolled it out like this and then realized, oh no, look what we're spelling. So now it's DEI instead. But yeah, this new cycle of for the 2024 Oscars is firmly in place. And that brings with it, these requirements essentially that if you are a minority or a woman, if you have disabilities, then guess what? You're probably going to get a lot more likely to get a job than before. If you felt held back, the Film Academy is coming in, the Academy of Arts and Sciences is coming in to right all those wrongs and bring us into the future. And there was an article, like an opinion piece that I read recently that inspired me to put this on here, written by a gentleman named Michael Seepley. I've never heard of the guy, but he just seemed so gung-ho. It's like he was really boosting the idea that this would make everything right that is wrong, in the industry and beyond. But how likely is that? And is it possible that this might, like we've talked about this before, but might this constrain creativity and artistic expression for, business purposes?
I gotta be honest here. When I initially, we first talked about this around the time that we did our Oscars episode this year, I was a little bit like clutching my pearls about this, but I kind of read more into this, and it seems like these I shouldn't even say requirements, but these guidelines are very easy to follow, like incredibly easy, and I think that's purposefully done that, so they did that on purpose because they knew that if they did it that way, that the Academy could just kind of poop this out and it would, give themselves a pat on the back, but it's really nothing. I mean, what we're really looking at here is, just to kind of give a sort of the Cliff Notes version of what this exactly is it's 4 guidelines, A through D. And in order for a film to qualify for Best Picture, that film needs to satisfy 2 of 4 of those guidelines. And basically, guideline A is for actors, and it says you have to have a certain number of actors in your film from an underrepresented group. And Chuck already explained what exactly an underrepresented group means. And then standard B focuses on people behind the camera, and it's the same thing, underrepresented groups. Standard C focuses on the film's distribution, and then standard D focuses on the marketing of the film. And it's all the same stuff. It's all underrepresented groups. And so I guess the thing that a lot of studios are going to do with this, I don't know if you read through this, but it's all like incredibly easy shit to satisfy.
Yes.
And what I think like 90% of the studios are going to do is satisfy standard C and D.
Yes.
Because it's so easy.
It's behind the camera.
Yeah, it's literally like hire 2 interns.
Yes.
And so you can hire an intern for like pennies on the dollar, and that's probably what they'll do. Or they'll create the like David Zaslav Equitable Film Fund and pretend that they have some sort of like, some sort of like film equity fund or something like that, and then that'll satisfy that'll satisfy C. And then D, I mean, D is already satisfied in and of itself, because when you look at you look at standard D, it's basically marketing and like design, like graphic design, that type of stuff for a film. And if we're being completely honest here, there is a lot of gay men and women in that field, and so I mean, it's easy as fuck to do this. So it's like it's a whole lot of nothing.
Did they give themselves an easy out? Yeah, because there was a lot of histrionics. Like there was like I have Bill Maher playing right now, and and his beef is well articulated, but yeah, we all were kind of maybe overlooking what was actually happening here and how shallow I guess it ultimately would prove to be from an activistic point of view, because they're really not giving anything up. Like there was an article even from 2 years ago when this was first announced that I read that kind of like broke it down and showed that there was only like maybe a handful of Best Picture winners, even like over like the last 30 years, that would maybe get knocked off. And that's only if they didn't satisfy those two random things behind the scenes that historically, like, they wouldn't have been in a position to do, just because there wasn't enough people trying to break in, and most doors just kind of only being opened to, like who was friends to a producer, so like, I don't know, like you kind of forgive the fact that some of those maybe like are technically off because we have no way of knowing, how progressive it was behind the scenes in the art department and so on. But
Yeah.
the one criticism of it, does kind of stand to a degree, but they gave themselves an out because they made it possible for you to make something historically accurate, without, shoving a person of color into a place that they shouldn't be in. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to get to that very soon in the next topic. But like, if you don't want to be as like wackadoodle as like the BBC and Netflix can be, you don't have to be, because you can just find a way to make sure that underrepresented groups have a foothold and have a way to get a leg up, going forward. So yeah, I'm glad we came back to it, because as I also was going through it, I was like, hold on now. This is really not only easy to do, but it's almost too easy. Like there's no skin in the game to actually be progressive in this way. It is, and if you look, I have a paragraph somewhere that I put into this like feed loop here, where it shows like who they're taking their cues from, and it literally is just getting their marching orders from other corporations, and from activistic nonprofits. So it's not even their ideas. They're just like, look at all these cool people who we are bringing in as stakeholders into the conversation. So it's not even their ideas. You know what I mean? They are just going to the activists and saying, what do we need to fucking do? And then we will find the like least committed way to show that we are doing that. And I think that, so I'm less mad at them because they didn't try. But I think everybody should be mad at them just to a degree for our own reasons, if you feel one way about it or another. Yeah, it's the classic corporate thing of just not actually doing enough, just doing the easiest thing possible instead of something truly meaningful. But at the same time, I do think something meaningful will come from this in terms of getting more people from these groups. Yeah, I think it will succeed. I think the people who are boosting this aren't wrong. Like, people who, like, can you imagine a deaf person actually being, singled out? Like, are you vaguely interested in this field? Okay, well, I'll teach you how to do a meat potatoes job, and then become an executive someday, instead of just being a sideshow act that the Academy's, gives an Oscar to every once in a while. Because, so that's, my feeling has evolved, I guess I could say.
Yeah. Yeah, same. And yeah, I think you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, there's probably going to be at least some good that comes from this. The other thing I did want to point out too is, like a lot of things, it does come back to money, like how can we monetize this? And if you go on their page for this on their website, at the very bottom, there's like a link, a hyperlink that you can click on that says like diversity and inclusion resources. So you click on that and it brings you to a page of all of the different organizations and companies that you can hire on your own dollar.
Exactly.
That'll consult for your film. And at the very top of that list is a organization called Academy Gold, which is the Academy's own organization that specializes in stuff like this. So, I mean, it all kind of comes back to money. So, I wanted to put that out there too, that, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts completely. And then also, there are still those specialized cases that these sort of rules are really like fucked up for. Like, if you are a super indie filmmaker who has aspirations of becoming a Best Picture winner, you can pretty much kiss those aspirations goodbye.
Yeah.
Because if you're making a film on a shoestring budget, or not even a shoestring budget, but let's say $5 million, you can't hire these firms. You can't afford to you can't afford, you don't have a marketing department, you don't have a PR department, you can't satisfy options C and D because you don't even have those fucking departments on your movie. And so it's like, you know, the people who get hurt from this most are going to be the small indie filmmakers, and then also the people that are in places that, frankly don't have very much diversity. I mean, let's be frank here. Like, take I don't know, Siberia. Like, if you are an aspiring filmmaker in the middle of Siberia, you know, what are your options? You know, what are you gonna do? And or like Iceland, Greenland, Southern Australia, you know, what do those people do? I don't know. But,
it's like in those other countries, to the credit of other nations around the world and how they spend tax dollars, I would assume that the film ministry of Norway will be on top of that if they feel like they have young talent worthy of it. But it does kind of gatekeep. It makes gatekeeping even, the gate's even, you know, higher. It's even harder to get noticed and get let in than ever before. You know, even before these rules came in place. But yeah, like I would be actually interested in trying to wrangle the guys in Bismarck who are, they have like this pseudo faith-based film company. They just made a movie called The End of the Rope about the last lynching in North Dakota that occurred after this dude massacred a family. And it's like, would have to imagine, but like knowing some of the people involved in that and seeing the behind the scenes for it, yeah, that guy doesn't have a hope of getting any attention if meeting this rubric is like has to be, you know, met. He didn't even bother trying. He worked with who was around him and who was willing. And you know, unless you're going out of your way to be like, hey, yo, black guy, I need you to be in like X percentage of my film, then yeah, like but then it becomes a little obvious.
Yeah.
But we also have to get into, we kind of alluded to it, but there's, you know, doing this kind of thing in a forced way that serves nobody. And Netflix is guilty of this in all kinds of directions, and it's not the only thing they're guilty of, because they are utterly committed to just embracing the wackadoo, the indefensible, and like the utterly incomprehensible, just for the sake of entertainment. Or like what is their thing? Because there is a lot of examples of them just, you know, going with like giving a platform and a megaphone to a very loud voice, a very entertaining voice, but maybe not the most accurate or even factual.
Yeah, so this kind of stems from a story this week that got a lot of coverage, that Netflix released this trailer for Queen Cleopatra, which is a docudrama series that'll be half documentary and then half like reenactments.
Yeah, they do these kinds of things, like about Rome and whatnot. Yeah.
And this is from Jada Pinkett Smith, and essentially what this docudrama alleges is that Cleopatra was black. And they make no bones about what they're trying to sell here. There is in this trailer that Chuck is showing now, there's a moment where a woman says something to the effect of, "My grandma told me that, you know, I don't care what your teacher in school tells you. Cleopatra was a black woman." And it's like so obvious. And yeah, so people were naturally sort of pissed by this. I think they're all now being sued by a lawyer from Egypt about this.
Yeah.
Netflix is, and they actually had to disable the comments on the YouTube for the trailer because it was just turning into a really huge shitstorm. And then if you have the browser extension that shows YouTube dislikes, as I do, you can see that it's a like 8-to-1 dislike to like ratio on this video.
Holy shit.
So it's pretty bad. And yeah, so Netflix has been getting a lot of press for this recently, that they make a lot of documentaries that have bad information or only like one side of the story, where the filmmakers purposefully ignore like phone calls or like interview requests from people of the opposing viewpoints, like the Bob Ross documentary that was done by Melissa McCarthy and her husband, fucking Ben Falcone, popping up again here.
Yeah.
They deliberately ignored phone calls from Bob Ross's estate for interview requests so that they could just get their side of the story out there.
What?
And then they printed on their documentary, we reached out to the Bob Ross estate and they declined to comment, or they didn't return our calls.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Like, they shouldn't be allowed to make anything ever again.
Yeah,
like you should lose all of your cards for that one. Like, what the fuck? Like, that's fucked up.
It's pretty bad, yeah. And then there's stuff like the Harry and Meghan documentary uses some footage that I guess is really misleading. I haven't seen that one, so I'm not 100% on that one. And then I want to talk about this Son of Sam documentary for a second, because I haven't seen this, and you have, right?
I have, and I know very well the book that was written by the guy that they focus on in that, Maury Terry. I grew up like with my parents having a library in our basement, and when insomnia would kick in, I would grab something off of there. And his pet theory was that there was multiple killers, that it was a national satanic, like murder, like cult there was many Sons of Sam, including some individuals, one of whom wound up killing himself on the Minot Air Force Base in the 70s. But it all gets undone, whether, it's because he's absolutely, wrong, or because there's no way he can prove it. But the most egregious thing that the documentary does is they entertain all of his ideas as they tell the story of Maury Terry's life and how it all fell apart and how he died and how no one believed him, because he was like a New York Daily News, writer during Son of Sam, and he was the he was the contrarian. And ultimately it ends with the revelation that because of DNA evidence, modern DNA stuff, they were able to determine who had killed a woman from Bismarck, North Dakota, who got killed in the chapel at Stanford. Her name was Arliss Perry. Okay. And his thought was, it obviously was part of the murder cult people. But it wasn't. It was just some guy who was a security guard on campus. And it was like staged to look like that, though. So he took the bait. Like the guy took a crucifix and like shoved it up her and like desecrated the altar. But yeah, and the very final frame of the documentary, they show the body camera footage of this dude getting arrested and killing himself so that he can't be arrested. Like in the modern day, just like, by the way, Maury Terry was wrong. Like, but then like after you've watched like fucking hours of this thing, so like, I don't know, I haven't watched Ancient Aliens, which is probably the most egregious example of them, giving a mouthpiece to someone who's utterly, uncredible, but writes incredible, like basically, like conspiracy nonsense, like alternate, like pseudo historical readings of geology and, blah, blah, blah. And he's right about some things. We are finding crazy. This is Graham Hancock I'm talking about here. He is right about some things. There is a lot of evidence being discovered with LiDAR technology in the Amazon of these massive constructs and these things that we think are mountains that are actually, grown over habitations that were too advanced for our historical understanding that we have now. But yeah, there is mysteries out there, and he's tapping into these small little things that are being adjusted and then saying these massive things are true. And then they're not talking to actual scientists, because the ones who talk to actual scientists don't get the ratings that Graham Hancock projects do.
Yeah. And that's, you bring up a good point, because that's what Netflix is trading in with all of these documentaries. They're trading in like entertainment versus like actual like learning. And if they were to actually present, all of the facts, or they were to present the, the more boring details, it would probably look something more similar to like a 90s History Channel TV show before the History Channel turned to shit. It would, something more dry, something a little bit more boring. So I mean, they're trading in this stuff for a reason, because people actually like think it's exciting, and they want to watch it and they want to believe that it's real. And so I don't know, I guess the big question is, like, what do we do about it? Like, or like what
can you do? People are gonna watch the thing that looks the most fun, yeah. At this point, no one is going, oh, this seems like, some people are going, oh, that looks informative. I think I'm going to learn something interesting. More people are going, I want to learn something wild. That is more appealing. And for some people, like with Jada Pinkett Smith, they will click on the thing that reflects them. And I don't know, and like the BBC does this. They'll make Anne Boleyn black just for the sake of a headline, maybe a boost in the viewership. But Jada Pinkett Smith actually believes this thing to be true. It's like Santa Claus. Some of these historical figures are really removed from who they actually were, and it's like the whole "we was Kangs" movement, that Hotep bullshit. It's just getting mainstreamed by her, but I'm glad it's getting rebuked. But it does, like, there's just too many things that people have just gotten away with saying on these larger platforms. I would expect this shit in the bowels of YouTube or on Rumble or like Live Leak, but not coming to be direct from the people who created the modern streaming paradigm as we know it. Like that's a little egregious, but you can't hold them accountable if you're still subscribed.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I guess this would be my advice to anybody, who watches these things. I don't really watch these Netflix documentaries anymore, but I mean, this can go for any documentary. The second that you are done watching one of these things, pull out your phone, go to Google, and just Google search, what did this documentary get wrong, or what did documentary X not say, or like what is the argument for documentary, just search for the conflicting information as to what was just presented, and then form an opinion, because that's kind of what I've gotten into the habit of doing. Like I watched I didn't never talked about it on here, but I watched the HBO doc Navalny. About
I watched that as well.
Yeah, and so immediately when I was done with that, I just went on my phone and I said, because I don't know, he's portrayed as such like a saint in that movie, and I immediately went and like was seeking out more information about the guy, and he's got some skeletons in his closet, and a lot more than that documentary would want you to believe, and so. Just do that. That would be my advice to anyone.
I had to do that with that Woody Allen thing that Kirby Dick did. Because, like, I don't know. Not that I am like a Woody Allen supporter or anything, but God, what the heck is the mother's name? His ex-girlfriend. Is it Mia Farrow? That woman is a psycho. And the fact that Kirby Dick never tapped into that because he's buying into just the listen and believe philosophy. Like I totally believe that something happened with that child and Woody Allen, but it could also be true that this woman is psychotic and shouldn't be allowed to adopt, children from, poor countries anymore. At a certain point, no matter how rich you are, I think people should just stop letting rich, crazy ladies adopt children. That needs to stop. They just don't treat them well. But I'll get off my soapbox so we can move on to what's more important to people going forward, which is, how do we actually feel about The Mandalorian now that it has basically ended the first phase of its existence? And this third season, Matt, very uneven, it goes without saying. We won't belabor the things we really didn't like, but where did this season end for you? Did it adjust itself? Did it land on its feet at the end, or did it leave you wanting and questioning why?
Yeah. Oh man, I thought this season was largely terrible. Like I thought it was very bad, and I don't know, I feel like it feels like a series of bad decisions. They've kind of stripped everything that made the first two seasons good out of this, like this sort of neo-Western style, the sort of themes of faith versus family, that's all gone. you know, they've turned it into like a series of video game side quests, and like with complete non sequitur episodes that are just like, one episode we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this for 2 episodes, and then we're going to do, and then oh, the actual story of the season is going to show up in the last 3 or so episodes, you know, the actual like meat of the story. And so yeah, it was awful. I thought, like, as a whole, like, I thought this was really bad. There's
some cool like shots, you know, and some like sequences that are kind of neat, I suppose. But yeah, I agree with you. It objectively fucking terrible when you compare it to those first two, because it just became, instead of being The Mandalorian, which was a brand almost unto itself, even better than Star Wars at large, more people were excited about The Mandalorian itself. You know, Star Wars had diminished that much, you know, in this time period. And now they have just made it another Star Wars show. It is just, they blew it up, they slapped it back together, but instead of making an actual story, they just turned it into a bunch of launching pads for other projects. And you know, and one of those projects is the sequel trilogy that, you know, itself. They need to somehow, you know, fork Mando into mattering for that thing's sake. Because apparently everything that was happening in Mando was all about resurrecting. It's the somehow Palpatine returned. Now that's what Mandalorian is ultimately about.
Yeah, it's, oh gosh, it was so, it's just so bad. And like, you know, I think you tossed this out the last time we talked about this, when we talked about the season opener, that the idea that the Book of Boba Fett really like fucked this show up. And I think you were really right about that, because I think it's pretty clear now what happened was, I don't know if it was because of the pandemic, but basically they took what was supposed to be the first half of this season 3 and they jammed it into the middle of the Book of Boba Fett. And then that's why like the first half of this season 3 is so like, just like pointless, like nothing happens or nothing consequential happens, and then suddenly the back half, everything consequential happens, and it just feels like you should be watching that Mandalorian arc from Book of Boba Fett and then just immediately segue into the second half of this season. And I don't know, they just really screwed themselves there by doing that, because that's what this season should have been.
Because they clearly even took some ideas that were supposed to be for the continued adventures of Mando and Baby Grogu, you know, and just put them in this third season. Like that whole bullshit with Jack Black and Lizzo makes so much fucking sense now, because it basically was the pilot for the new show that we're gonna get, which I really am not excited for. Like this last season could have just been like 8 episodes of Mando just sitting on his porch watching the sunset while Grogu chases frogs, and that would have been better than what they did. Better use of money, better use of everyone's time. Like, just have a really long screensaver and turn it into an art installation and have it be like this big statement about like, now the warrior rests, you know, like let's do something like that. But but this is just selling action figures. Basically, they're just trying desperately to take all of Dave Filoni's cast-offs they're elevating his animation shit so that it can be, you know, mainlined in a way. And then they're taking all of the stuff that Kathleen Kennedy was too fucking good for, that don't involve Luke, Leia, and Han, and they're just gonna, you know, jury rig them into whatever the fuck they're gonna be doing with Star Wars from now on. That's why we're getting Thrawn. I know we're happy that the blue boy is here, but it's not gonna be the same. It's just not gonna be right, because the people who should be in these fucking stories are either, you know, dead in real life or are definitely dead in the universe. And now they've let Palpatine, his descendants, take over the Skywalker name, so there are no Skywalkers left. And now they're trying to sell us all this other stuff. It's kind of like what we, you know, grew up with, and all the nostalgia is still there as before, but it's all just, you know, talk about, you know, puppets on strings. They're skin suiting Star Wars to such an extent that I can't look at it without seeing the insect underneath.
Yeah. Well, and they're gonna they're making the exact same mistake that they did with Book of Boba Fett in this show.
Yeah.
And I don't see how they're doing that, because what they're doing now is they're saying, just like they did with Boba Fett, they're saying, oh, this Thrawn guy's coming. For the continuing adventures of Admiral Thrawn, go watch Ahsoka. Just like they did with this show and Boba Fett, they're making the exact same mistake that they made before. And I don't see how they don't see that, like, I'm sure Ahsoka's probably going to be good. I do think that a lot of what made this season a lot worse than the first two was Dave Filoni's assumed absence from this show because he's off doing Ahsoka. And so this is just at this point, this is just the Jon Favreau show. I think Filoni did like one episode this season, and he's off, doing his Ahsoka because he wants to do his characters. He doesn't fucking care about Mandalorian. He wants to do his Rebels characters. And so
what's wrong with Favreau? Why is he fucking up so bad? Was it because he knew that he wasn't gonna get elevated up? He wasn't gonna become an exec, as it were. He's still just a lame hired gun, and they weren't going to let him be anything else, so he just quit trying. Is that what it is?
I don't know. It could be. I mean, I think he probably had this show became way bigger than anybody thought it was going to, I think. And he probably had like 2 seasons worth of really good stories. And now he's sort of running on fumes, probably. It would be my guess. And yeah, it's just like, it doesn't seem like the people who were involved in this show or were interested in doing this show are no longer interested in doing it. Because even look at like Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal was off doing The Last of Us when this show was filming. And I want to point something out to people if they don't realize it, but there are 2 actors that appear in the credits for every Mandalorian episode this season, and their names are Lateef Crowder and Brendan Wayne. And those 2 guys are the stand-ins for Pedro Pascal, who have now been elevated to leading star roles in the credits, because Pedro Pascal is not in the suit for a second of this season. I guarantee it. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I guarantee that Pedro Pascal did all of his voiceover shit. He never showed his face once this season, and he wasn't in the suit for a second. And so
not even on set for a second.
Yeah, he wasn't on set for a second. He did all of his voiceover stuff distanced, I bet. And yeah, it's just like nobody that cared about this show cares about it any longer.
That's what I mean. That final shot that I was, gushing about, because it's like the one thing I really loved about it. They couldn't even get him on set to pop his helmet and just like crack a cold one.
Yeah, awesome.
That would have been awesome. Why couldn't they do that? Because Joel's a pretty busy guy, he keeps me here, keeps me there. Yeah, it's utterly disappointing when you get down to it. We will always have those first 2 seasons, but it's just like, why can't Disney ever just let anything good be good? Like why does it always have to eventually get twisted into pretzels, trying to fulfill so many fucking obligations? Those first 2 seasons worked because they sang their own fucking song within the Star Wars symphony, and everyone was just digging their contribution a bit too much. Because now it just sounds too much like the sloppy hole that we all have been getting. It's no longer a juicy morsel in the stew. Now it's just bland mush, just like everything else.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Too bad. I'll tell you what isn't bland though. What's like spicy, incendiary. In fact, it's for a remake and a reboot, for crying out loud. But Amazon is giving us a new take for the 21st century on Dead Ringers, the David Cronenberg film starring Jeremy Irons. This is, has Rachel Weisz playing a dual role, as Beverly and Elliot, 2 radical gynecologists and obstetricians who are going to save the world and save, womanhood from pregnancy. But pretty fucked up in these first 2 episodes. I'll just say that, not for the faint of heart. It got me ready for, childbirth, that I'm going to be experiencing in a few months. This was the wrong week for me, man. Like, I got fucked up 2 ways to Sunday by everything that we watched. But what did you think about this? Like, were you excited going in, or were you trepidatious?
Yeah, I was looking forward to this. I mean, mainly because of who's involved with this show. The first two episodes are from Sean Durkin, the director of one of my favorite films of 2019, The Nest. And so I was totally down for the next thing that he does. And so and then also I think Karen Kusama is involved in this show in some aspects too. And so I'm looking forward to those episodes, but I haven't seen any of those yet. But yeah, I've also seen the first two episodes, and yeah, what you have here is two very, very different episodes of a show, because the first is sort of like a crash course in like the day in the life of a busy New York public hospital maternity ward, I guess. And yeah, pretty intense, like childbirth scenes and all the complications that could come along with that. And it kind of gets you ready for the show. It kind of like locks you in. And but yeah, this is an interesting take because, I don't know if you've seen the Cronenberg movie, but this show sort of swaps all of the like mutant women and like obsession with gynecological tools with a sort of like feminist bent a little bit, and more of a focus on they're putting the sci-fi stuff kind of in the background. I mean, it's still going on. You have like the test tube babies and stuff, but it's more rooted in reality, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it actually is confronting very real problems. And yeah, I don't know, as the female versions of these characters I find much more interesting than the male ones from the original one. Yeah, I don't know, like the whole like it's the storyline that's introduced is one of the sisters is desperately trying to get pregnant and is miscarrying all the time. And that's partially what's fueling all of their weird little sex games where they'll like lure dudes in with the more outgoing sister to fuck the other one, she's even like just like fucking them to collect their sperm basically, so that she could take the embryos and make a lab baby. But then at the same time, it can't help itself because the second episode is just a giant like look at how fucked up and awful rich people are. Yeah. But it still is entertaining. But like the big freak out she has after that like weird like game that they play, it was just like, oh wow, like why are we being so on the nose about this, and why is this the thing that wins? This Jennifer L, though, my God, she's wonderful as awesome. As the rich billionaire chick with the wife. And to keep talking on the cast, the woman who plays Jennifer L's like fourth wife, she was in The Deuce. And she recently made some comments about how she hasn't been able to find work after being on HBO's The Deuce. And I'm like, well, girl, you're here now. Why are you acting like you can't get hired? This is a pretty fucking good gig, from what I could tell.
Yeah, I mean, it's as you alluded to, the second episode is a very different beast than the first. I really enjoyed that. I hate to compare everything to Succession, but I think it's appropriate in this case because it's very similar. I mean, it's Succession, but if it were about the like Sackler family rather than the what's their name, the Madoffs, right?
The Murdochs.
The Murdochs. Yeah. And so it's like, and also, I mean, if you look at the writers for this show, there's a lot of them. There's I think like 6 or 7 writers on the show, but the 3 main ones are all Succession alumni. They're all people who wrote. So I mean, there's a reason why this second episode is like the way it is. And so, but yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it on a whole. Like, I loved all the stuff when they were talking about like tree panning their skulls and like,
oh, they all fold their hair down so you can, check it out.
Yeah. And like the children singing like Coldplay songs, like the little, how they had all like the blonde, like Ubermensch children singing the Coldplay, and it was just so weird, and it's like so like heightened reality, and that's what I like about it. But yes, I agree with you that both of the speeches in both episodes, the one at the dinner in the first episode, and then the other one in the second episode where they finally convince Jennifer Yield to come on board, they were just a bit too like, yes, queenified for me, just a little too like, they were very on the nose.
But all that said, Rachel Weisz is fucking killing it. I love her. Like the both of the sisters are identifiable in just the way that she's putting like the expressions on her face, the weird lilt that they have to their voices are distinct. But there's just so many like weird things that still aren't explained. Like, who is the Chinese hand servant that they have who like takes care of their stuff, and why is she collecting used tampons?
Well, I thought it was for I initially thought that she was doing that because that's what they were taking the less outgoing twins like genetic material from or something.
Okay.
Like that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not 100% on that.
That would make sense. Yeah.
At the end of the second episode, you're almost led to believe that she's sort of playing her own game against both of them. I don't know what she's doing, but she's doing something like to her own ends, I believe. Okay. I don't know that for sure, but
because she's just there when after everybody wakes up one morning, and and another character is like, wait a minute, who are you? Like, are you the maid? And she's like, yeah, I'm the maid, like all sarcastically. So it's really unclear who she is and what she does. But she gets them their Ubers and whatnot. But I don't know, Elliot and Beverly, they have the same names as the characters from the original movie too, which is fascinating to me. But God, where this show is going, I have no clue. Like it reminds me of Severance, because we're doing like bleeding edge, really like strange sort of corporate elite, technological advancement stuff. But these two characters are so alien around everyone, like normal humans, the elite humans. It doesn't matter who they're paired with. They just are they're strange creatures. And I want to know like what the show is going to identify, as the fuel. What is the source of their strangeness? Because in the original movie, it's all about like drug addiction and obsession and stuff like that. So it's hard to say, exactly where this is going to be going. But I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yeah, exact same. I'm definitely going to be continuing, and I would highly recommend people do the same, because I don't know, I just feel like a show like this isn't getting a lot of press out there, especially on a week like this week when you have all these giant movies taking the spotlight. They postponed like releasing stuff about this, recently. Like the hype got diminished because of its violent subject matter and whatnot, because there was one of the school shootings. Like Amazon publicly were like, we're not going to put out a Red Band trailer today, for Dead Ringers. Oh, because blood. That's another thing. Like blood, comes with childbirth. You need it to live, and you get your first blood from your mommy, which is why we're going to be heading into our unofficial Mother's Day review section. It's even more on point because we have Evil Dead Rises, which is the latest in that classic franchise of horror. Matt, take it away. Yeah, so Evil Dead Rise. When Lee Cronin was announced as the director for this next entry in the Evil Dead franchise, it was kind of a bit of a head-scratcher for me. He was the director of the very subdued, the very quiet horror film, The Hole in the Ground. And he was going to head up quite possibly one of the most balls-to-the-wall horror series out there. I guess it was kind of a weird match, but I guess he kind of proved the naysayers wrong. I think what Cronin has demonstrated here is that he knows exactly what an Evil Dead film should be. He strikes a balance between the horror and the comedy that hasn't been seen since the second film in the series. When you take something like Army of Darkness, while it's fun, it hews a little too close to the goofy camp and dispenses almost entirely with the horror of the previous films. And then you take the 2013 remake that was headed up by the underrated Fede Alvarez, which proved to be way too much for some people. It was deathly serious, and it was straight out of the early 2010s, having more in common with films like Saw or Hostel than it did any of the other Evil Dead films. But a decade removed from that film, Evil Dead Rise sort of injects everything that this series needed to be reinvigorated. It's got a new unique setting. It has a tenuous connection to the older films that doesn't rely too much on nostalgia. It's got plenty of unique gore and characters. I'm kind of reminded of the recent Hellraiser reboot that we just talked about recently, because it's a film that did the exact same thing as this one did. Similar to that film, at the end of the day, I suppose they're both fairly standard horror fare that don't really do that much to push the needle on the genre, but I think that's really all you need when your franchise is on such life support. So that's kind of where I sit with the film. What about you, Chuck?
Yeah, I found this movie excruciating in like all the right ways, because but it does things that I didn't even expect it to do on a horror level. Like the imagery at the end when you get the final boss version of the Deadite, and it's just I don't know how they did that. But yeah, the blending of practical effects and it was just seamless how it all fit together. And yeah, it fucked me up. And like seeing children get brutalized in this way, so unforgivingly, like the eyeball into the mouth, it was still playful even when it was killing kids, but it didn't turn me off, which is not something any other movie I've seen could do, because the children die in this, trigger warning, like young children, but the one you care about, the blonde-eyed beauty, well, I won't spoil what happens with her, I guess. But yeah, this movie had power. That opening sequence, that little that cold open, and then when the titles came up, that was fucking awesome. I want that framed on my wall someday. That was gorgeous. And a lot of, I don't know, there's some things were contrived, no doubt. It's a horror movie, but it never ever offended me, and I would not be disappointed if he got another run at making another one. I don't know how he is the guy that knows how to do a Sam Raimi justice in this way, but I don't even think Raimi could have made an Evil Dead movie this good today. So I don't know. That's my hot take if I have one. I was thoroughly impressed with this.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think Raimi is kind of in that headspace anymore. He's more about producing these movies now to give these sort of new up and coming filmmakers a shot, and I really like that idea. But yeah, I mean, I guess you had kind of already alluded to it. The intro scene. So this movie is bookended by an introductory scene and then sort of a final scene that tie together that don't really have much to do with the rest of the movie. And on its face, I think that's sort of a cool idea that this entire movie is basically a prequel to that introductory scene. But I thought it was kind of a weird, unnecessary choice on a whole, because I mean, it didn't really tie into the movie in any way.
No.
And I mean, the titles were cool. I did really like that. That looked really awesome. But the thing that I thought was really odd about that whole introductory scene and then transitioning into the actual movie was the title card that came up that said 1 day earlier.
That ruined the surprise. It would have been much nicer to not have that.
Yeah, it felt like just a studio note where they're the audience is too dumb to understand what this is, so you need to put that in there. And so, because had it not been there, then you would have kind of been oh, that was weird. I wonder what that was. And then towards the end of the movie, that girl shows up again in the parking garage, and you're okay, I get it now. But instead of doing that, the second that woman shows up at the end, you know exactly who she is
and what's going to happen
what's
to
going
her.
on. And so it's I don't know. It was a weird choice, but definitely something that seemed handed on down on high from the studio. But other than that, my complaints with the film are, pretty far in between. I think I wrote in our doc that there is some really weird, like, Chekhov's guns. This is a movie full of Chekhov guns.
Oh my god!
Like, anytime you see the camera linger on something for more than like 2 seconds, it's going to come back into play. And some of them worked for me, and some of them didn't. I thought some of the weird ones were like the making the son a DJ, or like interested in DJing just so they could have an excuse to have a turntable in the apartment. And it's like, oh, look at my $10,000 DJ setup while my mom lives in this dilapidated building. It's just weird. And but yeah, I mean, other than stuff like that, I really enjoyed this. And yeah, it gives you everything you want in an Evil Dead movie. The gore and everything. And did you have any like standout moments for you of like like lines of dialogue or gore or anything like that?
Well, you can kind of see it in the trailer loop I'm running, but it's from the opening sequence when the cousin is checking on the other girl, and she just like is playfully grabbing on her ponytail, and I was like, oh shit, and then then she gets scalped. And then the line is, "Who's the meat puppet now?" And it's just like, Jesus Christ. And then it was like, I instantly was just like that's the kind of like irreverent and like, I don't know, like what I love, what scares me, what genuinely scares me about the Deadites in these movies is just how like gleefully like evil and like sadistic that they are. Like it is how the chaos entities from Warhammer, or like the monster from Event Horizon, like that kind of thing where they're just like, oh, I'm gonna get off so much when I tear you to pieces and take you apart, like that kind of thing. Like it is so fucking scary when the mom also like first starts showing, and she starts like saying all the fucked up shit that the Deadites say, and even when like the projectile like movie vomit happens, it is played so straight and it feels so real in the movie that like because unlike Army of Darkness where all that shit does happen, it's heightened and you're just laughing at it, because it's goofy, but the way that the actors and all the actors in this are awesome, the way that they would react to everything, I don't know, everything just landed perfectly for me, and like this is a solid fresh tomato for me, if that I'm throwing their way, if I have one to throw.
Yeah, same. I mean, yeah, just pitch perfect all the way through. And my personal favorite, there's been a lot of talk about the cheese grater scene.
Yeah,
that's gotten, and that was okay. I mean, it was a little like wince inducing, but I personally had more trouble with the girl eating the glass and then showing it in her throat. And but yeah, and then the Deadite dialogue is so good in this movie. Like open the door like you open your legs, you groupie slut, and then when all the Deadites are in the hallway and they're all chanting "Dead by dawn, dead by dawn." That's just so perfect. And there wasn't a line of Deadite dialogue in this film that I thought was like misplaced, or sometimes, or even like cringy. Sometimes they totally could be. It's totally possible for something like that to come across as just like goofy and odd, and forced. It was all really, really great. Yeah. And shout out to the whole cast, but Alyssa Sutherland, who played the mom, just really, really great. She, just all the stuff she's doing with her body and her like mannerisms and
the smile and like the rage that she could have in her eyes.
Yeah, just incredible. And yeah, just her and the way she did all those lines, delivered those. And another really, really great one too was when she called her kids like titty sucking monsters, or parasites, titty sucking parasites. Yeah, that was incredible. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And there are parts in this movie where I want to shout out this one sort of subversion of expectations in particular that I enjoyed, where it's right after the daughter gets the like doll head spear through her head.
Yeah.
And
they foreshadowed that shit. You know,
yeah, they did foreshadow that, yeah. But there's that shot, you know, she dies, and then they do a shot where, you know, you think she is going to, you know, come back alive and disappear off somewhere. But then when the camera pans over to the bed she's on, instead of her being gone, she's wrapped up in a sheet because the son was smart enough to like put her in a sheet and, you know, like tie her up. And I just thought that was really good because they were totally playing with expectations there, because in any other horror movie, the camera would have panned over and the daughter would have been gone and they wouldn't have known where she was. And so I really, really liked that. And, you know, it's just stuff like that really keeps it fresh.
And all the way to the end, and it escalated, you know, just the right way. And even like the elevator full of blood, like when that started happening, I was like, oh fuck, like how are they going to get out of this? And then what I appreciated was the fact that they admitted that gravity still existed. You know what I mean? Because eventually that thing won't be able to hold all that like literal gallons of blood that are just appearing in the elevator. So yeah, there was logic and there was coherence to it. And like I alluded to before, the final form, the giant like thing monster, the Rat King, that's a good word for it. That thing was amazing and iconic. I would even dare to say, like, I'm gonna remember this movie, and I did not think I was going to. But from the moment I saw the trailer, I was willing to be interested and excited about it. But this could easily be in my top 10 for the year when we get right down to it. This was so good. Enthusiastic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I could see that being the case too. And yeah, I mean, just to call out the ending too, when things get really crazy and, you know, they start putting things in the wood chipper and that was really well done, you know, at the end when it's just the head left and, you know, she finally decides, you know, oh, there's nothing left of my sister, and just kicks the head into the wood chipper. Just really, really great, really well done. I mean, I don't think this movie got as crazy as the 2013 one. Have you seen that one by chance?
Yeah, quite a few times actually. And that's what I found shocking was that like when it was over, you know, even though I still was like, wait, is that all? Because the way that people talked about this, the way critics talked about this, you would think that this movie like did things that you would never want to see or never thought you would see. You know, that it was shocking and in ways that, you know, that these, I don't know, they just oversold it into a degree, or their sensibilities. I don't know. I feel like I question what some of these critics have seen. You know what I mean? If this was the one that sets you off.
Yeah, same. I mean, it's really not like, it doesn't get nearly to the level as the 2013 one, but it's a different beast. This one is more akin to the spirit of what a Evil Dead movie should be, and so that's why I think it's more successful than that one, even though I do really love that one too, the 2013 one, for its own reasons. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't, you know, it's not that revelatory as people would lead you to believe. It's just a very well done horror film.
It is. And if you believe hard enough, you could believe that this high rise is the same one that Ryan Gosling's character in Drive lives in. You know, like that'd be kind of that. Hey, that's an idea, Hollywood. You know, just have a central location and then just put a bunch of different movie characters in it for a guest starring, you know, thing. I don't know. It's just cameos. That's all that Hollywood has become.
Yeah. Before we move off this, I do want to ask you, you know, just as far as the future is concerned, the movie is, you know, defying expectations. I think last I checked before we started today, it was at about 23 million. And they're already talking about, you know, they're putting Bruce Campbell out in the wild to promote this, even though he's just an executive producer. And he's saying that, you know, Raimi's writing the Evil Dead Bible right now, and he wants, you know, Evil Dead films every 2 to 3 years. And so I don't know, what do you make of that? Would you welcome that? Do you think that should be the thing? Or
I don't know. I think what makes this movie so powerful is that you gave some room to breathe. I know that they did that Ash vs. the Evil Dead show, but I didn't watch it. So I don't have a frame of reference.
Same.
So for me, I just have the Fede Alvarez movie, and then I have this one, and there's a decade in between them, and they both are worthy and distinct, and they aren't diminished by any bullshit in between. And if we're getting, I don't know, we run the risk of there being a dog, in the mix every 2 to 3 years, and I don't know if that's such a good idea. Ultimately, I would welcome more. Don't get me wrong. But I just hope that they tune that frequency a little bit, or just work really fucking hard, to make sure that Bible is up to snuff, or we're fucked. Because being Marvel is hard. Obviously, look at how DC has been handled, and I just don't know if this, humble little horror franchise deserves to be, I don't know, put down the assembly line like this, because eventually the sawdust will start getting mixed with the sausage.
Yeah, same. I'm kind of in the same headspace where, I guess maybe every 3 years. We don't need to biannualize this. This doesn't need to be the next Saw series where they're like, if it's Halloween, it's Saw, those type of things. And
because that got really old after a while.
Yeah, it did. And so, yeah, I think that if you're gonna do them every 3 years, let's do one-offs. Let's do a series of one-offs. Let's do these movies that are, maybe in the same universe, but different locations, different groups of characters, different deadites, and let's just do it that way, because we don't need continuity in this. I know, that's probably exactly the opposite of a lot of Evil Dead fans want. They want a 65-year-old Bruce Campbell, spouting one-liners, and I just don't think that's what this series needs. And
no, because he had his cameo in this, because allegedly on one of the records that the boy is playing, you can hear Bruce Campbell go, "That's why it's called the Necronomicon," because he is a time-displaced Ash, slipping from one decade to another, just having his adventures. And that's all cool and all, but I don't need to see that. I think this worked so much better from having no connective tissue beyond that. And that was something that only a, eagle-eared fan would have, picked up on. And I only know because someone talked about it in an interview, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I feel pretty much the same. Yeah, go out and see it. This is, of the movies we're talking about this week, this is the one to go see in theaters, and we'll tell you why right now.
Good God. Because I did go see a little film from, the cinematic master known as Ari Aster. It was called Beau is Afraid, based on his short film Beau from his time at the American Film Institute. He spent a lot of time honing this thing and crafting this thing into a feature film from that initial concept. If you're going to see Beau is Afraid, I recommend watching the original short film. It makes sense, because that initial germ, only half of it is really relevant to the feature film he ended up making, starring Joaquin Phoenix with an array of actors from Amy Ryan to Parker Posey, to Nathan Lane. Even Patty Lupone shows up, and that's exciting if you're a Broadway fan. But this movie is incomprehensible, even though I'm about to describe how it is almost too easy to understand. There's just boundless vision here. Obviously, it's undeniable, and it takes the audience. It makes you think you're at the brink of transcendence. You're about to have some epiphany, something amazing is going to happen to your worldview very soon. And then instead your head just gets shoved up Ari Aster's ass so he could fart even more directly, into your respiratory system and then, eventually into your brain. Because this movie's destined to divide. It's going to stand apart from anything Aster made before it. It's going to, stand apart from anything he makes after. Because I don't think he's going to be allowed to go as ham as he does here, because he goes a little too hard in the paint, if you know what I mean. That said, an act of cinematic bravery that I will salute, but why do we need this? I know that everything is sterile and homogenous. I know that like everything is lame and it sucks, and that I should champion experimentation and someone being bold and crazy, you know, for once, and like doing so egregiously, you know, like to an extent that no one should ever be allowed to do again. Like A24 is drunk on power. Like they are about to introduce like an app that you can like be a member of, so you can mainline their product, you know, even deeper into yourself. But if this is what they're making, I question it, because at its core, yeah, Beau is Afraid is a very obvious exploration of a very anxious and disordered mind, and there's a lot about what this thing is exploring that is relatable. But does this make a good movie? Not really. It's not a narrative. This is just a nightmare, a drawn out, bad night at home after you ate too much right before you went to bed and watched Evil Dead Rise. You go to sleep with all of your, fucked up shit rattling around in your brain. And if you're Ari Aster, this is what you wake up and poop out onto the page. But did we need to know about his mommy issues? Did we have to be exposed to the concept of the penis monster that shows up at the end of this thing? I don't know if we did. Like Roger Ebert famously said about The Usual Suspects, to the extent that I can understand, I did not care. I desperately wanted to care about this movie, and it was easy to understand. But this is not an easy film to like, and it's almost impossible for me to love it personally in its totality. But I can respect it. There was a lot of craft and technical skill that went into this. The actors are acting their heart out, but when it's just Joaquin Phoenix basically being catatonic and running for 3 hours, you got to give me something more to walk out of the theater with. And this movie left me with very little other than the question, why? And with that, I'll ask you, where were you at when you walked out of this movie?
Yeah, I'm a little bit on the same track. You're sitting in on Ari Aster's therapy sessions. I think between this Hereditary and his short film Munchausen, he's got some like major mommy issues. And this is such a confounding film. And some people are going to hate this movie, and some people are going to praise this movie for the exact same reasons.
Yes.
And looking at it through a populist lens, the movie has almost none of the hallmarks of what is generally accepted as a good film. It's awfully paced. It has paper-thin characters that just appear and disappear from the film at the drop of a hat. The modicum of story that it does have just like drops out of the movie for entire like half-hour chunks, and then just like comes back. And it's criminally overly long. Yeah. And but at the same time, it's inventive, it's original, it's full of symbolism that's begging to be poured over, and that plenty of people probably will pour over it. And I don't know, it just comes down to like, what it comes down to at the end of the day is which of these things are important to you at the end of the day of a film, and how do you weigh them against the other things? And for me personally, I just don't think it's a very good movie. It's a good exercise. It's interesting, but it doesn't make for a good movie. And I thought it was bad as a movie.
Yeah, like you say, criminally overlong. You could have cut out an hour of 45 minutes out of this thing, and you probably would have had something that was more enjoyable to sit through. Because, I looked over at my fiance, Angie. She has the shot of Danny smiling crazily at the end of Midsummer tattooed on her leg. And I looked over at her, and she was just fucking stone-faced that whole fucking movie. And when we got to the car, she was just pissed off at Ari Aster for making the movie that he had made. Because, there's parts of it that she would have completely cut out, like all the shit in the woods, which I don't disagree. That's the shit I would get rid of too. Because this movie reminded me a lot of exercises like Enter the Void. I'm thinking of Ending Things. Just these esoteric, inscrutable, and dense pieces of art that are not movies that I would recommend to people. unless they just want the experience, because the experience of this is astounding, but you're mad about it afterwards. You're like, God damn it, why? The why is because, and that's kind of what it all kind of hinges on. But that said, there was parts of this that I found really effective, like the first sequence with him in his apartment. I loved the idea that the world, that we weren't really seeing the world for how it was. We were seeing it for how his neurosis allowed him to see it. But then I don't know, someone more astute will dig into this and figure out exactly when it becomes a dream. But I don't know, I'm curious what your thoughts on this are, because is anything we're seeing real, or is all of this just a nightmare?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess see, that's the thing, is I'm wondering what it's kind of impossible to know even what questions you should be asking for this film, because it almost seems as if Aster he's trying to like have it both ways, where he's trying to like, you don't know if he's parodying things, and you don't know if he's being serious about them. That's the thing. A lot of times. I mean, go back to his other movies. A lot of people call Midsummer and even Hereditary like black comedies, because there are moments in them that are comedic, but they're not like, haha, I'm gonna laugh out loud comedic. They're just kind of like a sort of think in your head, like, oh, that was kind of funny comedic, or like, oh, that's kind of ironic. And it's the same way with this movie, where it's like, does he want me to laugh at that? or is he being serious with me now? And it's like, it's hard to even know what questions you should ask. And that's one of them, because at the end of the day, who cares if it's real or not? Because
okay, fair.
I don't know, you know what I mean? Like,
would that make it more enjoyable? I don't know. Probably not. Which is why like no question is really worth asking. Because it's like, why is there a giant spider at the end of Enemy? Because it's like, you shouldn't, like, you're losing the game by asking the question in the first place. You should just that's why I think feeling is more important than meaning when it comes to watching movies like this. How did watching this make you feel?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I was also going to bring up the first sort of sequence, because I guess we could probably talk about each one of these on its own, but there's four sort of sequences in this movie, and the first one is by far the best in my opinion, because it's the most, it's sort of that heightened reality. And when I was watching this first sequence, set in and around his apartment, I was in. I was like, okay, this heightened reality, this could be awesome. He's gonna go on an adventure to get to his mom's house, and it's gonna be like this the whole time.
It's just gonna be this
awesome,
full-bore odyssey into the unknown, and it's gonna be exciting and thrilling. Oh God.
And I was also like, I was sort of invested for that first part too, because there was a portion of that first part that was threatening to really get a little too real for me, because when he was, on the phone with his mom, as somebody who comes from a very similar background, meaning my mom was a single mother, and I now live in a city that is about 3.5 hours away from her. I've had that exact same conversation on the phone with my mom before. So I was, sort of the guilt tripping of not coming to visit and stuff like that. And so it's like, this movie at a certain point was like, okay, you're really getting under my skin. And then it's just like nothing after that. I'm just like, nope, it's all gone. I don't care anymore. Immediately after that first section, I mean, I was a little bit into the second section. I think my sort of interest in the movie just completely nosedived during that like paint scene where
the girl daughter chugs paint and kills herself.
And they're just yelling at each other about painting the room, and that was sort of my moment, my sort of turnaround moment in the movie, where I was like, oh God, I do not like this, where this is going, and then it was just kind of a downhill from there type of thing.
Yeah. Because I have to stop myself from trying to make sense of the plot, quote unquote, of this movie, because yeah, the parts of the movie we were enjoying is completely derailed by the arrival of Amy Ryan running into him with a vehicle. And then all of a sudden, we're in a house. Nathan Lane is like a weird surgeon husband, and they keep on, I don't know, the heightened reality is maintained because they mention that their son has, died overseas fighting in Venezuela in Caracas, which is a place that we have never fought in. But I don't know. It's like a commentary on the war on terror, basically, or like rather the Iraq invasion, because like that kind of like Gold Star families of that generation. Oh my God, forgive me, you guys are kind of insufferable. I know I'm going to get canceled for this in the future, but like I don't mean this very sincerely. But like he's making fun of that, and it's like, why are you doing that, Ari? Why are you making fun of broken, poor families that experienced something traumatic? You know what I mean? But that's also when the movie completely derails. It loses all of its momentum, and then it's just a giant, slow walk about the dark pits of this man's brain as we explore all of his unresolved issues, all of the things from his past that have fucked him up. But if you read the wiki page for this, you have to take some of these revelations literally, because because after that he winds up in a forest with a bunch of like traveling orphaned performers, and then this weird guy shows up, and that is literally what his name in the credits is. He is like strange man, and he walks up to Beau and he's like, either he is Beau's father or he knew Beau's father. I don't know, the comment is just weird. And I
think he said that he knew him, and
then
he's still alive. I think that's what he said.
That's what he says. But then it's never brought up again, never explored again. It just shows up and then it's gone, because I don't know, that I have all of my questions that I like. Is it because of the weird drugs that he's been given? Like why is he suddenly in an animated dream sequence? Like, why is any of this happening? And then like that whole part with like his sons, where it just holds on him for like, where he's embracing his sons for like 6 minutes long, and they're just like, oh my God. That's when I was like, what the fuck is going on? And that's what, like, around the time when like Angie told me she was about ready to leave, which brings me to our next, like, when did your first walkout happen?
Oh yeah, it was definitely during the second section, during I think it might have been during the paint scene, or it could have been during like the forcing him to do drugs scene.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because I had a pretty good amount of people in my theater. I would say probably about 20 or so, and I think about half of them walked out. But shit. It was almost like a test of endurance, because it was just like two people at a time. Like, two people would walk out, and then 15 minutes later, two more people would walk out, and then 20 minutes later, two more people. So it was like, who could make it the longest?
Oh no. Jesus Christ. See, I was so absorbed in watching this movie that I didn't pay attention. I sat in the way back, so I would have been able to see, but I think everyone in my theater stayed. But we won't, I guess, spoil the ending quite yet. But when the lights came up, and like, that was our signal that the movie was actually over. Like, that's the quietest theater I've ever been in my life. Like, nobody coughed, nobody like talked, no one grumbled. Everyone just got up and left, and the first thing anybody said was me to the theater employees, and I was just like, Ari Aster is a fucked up dude. And then the guy was like, oh, is this movie weird? He was like, I wanted to see it. And I was like, you could do that. And then I just kept on walking. And then I took a piss because I had drank like an entire gallon of Code Red.
Yeah, it was pretty similar in mine too. Nobody really moved for a second or like a minute or two after the lights came up. It was just a very somber atmosphere and very strange. But yeah, I want to go back to you were talking before about the third part of the film, and unlike I can't really make heads or tails of the second part with Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane. like other than the commentary that you were talking about the military family, I have no idea what that second section meant in the frame of reference to Beau as a character. But this third section, I think, is very clearly showing him the life that he could have had he not been affected by all of his like abnormalities. It's showing him the life he could have lived essentially without his mom, because we'll talk about it once we get to the fourth part, but essentially his mom is the root of all of his problems, I think, is what the ending implies.
Because one of the production names, like the fake names that they used for this movie while they were making it, was Mona's Choice, and that's the name of his mother's character. And yeah, the only reason Nathan Lane and Amy Ryan are there is because you eventually find out they are the employees of his mother.
Yeah, that's right.
Because like, did you see them in the picture? I didn't see them. All I could see was Parker Posey. Mm-hmm. Who I just want to salute you, madam. Thank you. For still giving us the goods and the ripeness of your age. Unless that was a body double, I would forgive you. But that was chef's kiss, magnificent. She has back dimples, for crying out loud. But to get to there, he has to endure this psychological ego death for a man who has no ego. Because he's just getting his soul crushed. He's getting this euphoria of getting a glimpse of what could be, and then it all just gets shit on again. And before you know it, everyone's getting shot. And that weird veteran who has like machine guns and tracking devices after him. And it's shortly thereafter that he eventually winds up at his mother's what do they call those things? The Shiva. Her Shiva is getting the catering is going home. It's all over. And he's just walking around her empty house and the headless corpse in the casket. That is the one moment I laughed out loud at. And I was the only person to do it, which reinforced for me that it was very inappropriate for me to do so.
It's a callback too to Hereditary. There's a couple of moments like that. There's also the callback to Midsummer when the lawyer drops to his death on that rock at the very end. Yep.
Goddamn. And see, and that's where and once the Mona shows the sex scene happens, which is the most cringe-inducing thing I've ever seen, but probably the most realistic male orgasm you've ever seen on screen, just in the way that it was acted. I don't know, that whole part was so fucking weird, and it just seemed like it was in a totally different movie, from all the other strangeness we had been getting. But did she die because the dick was so good, or did she die because he came so much that it came out her eyeballs?
Okay, here's how I kind of interpreted it. Was so all those people, as you said already, we come to find out that all of these people that have been sort of put in Beau's way work for the mother. And I think this movie it's very, very Greek poetry, Greek playwright, in that, the Odyssey or Oedipus Rex, where like a Greek god, Beau's mother does not like the way in which he honors her, or he is honoring her. He's not honoring her with his presence. He's not honoring her by coming to see her. And so the way that I sort of understood it is that she put all of these obstructions in his path in order to get to her, so that, in spite of all these obstructions, when he finally got to her, he was supposed to honor her. And I just kind of
instead he defiles her bed with a common whore.
Yeah, and the way that I kind of took it was, going back to the Greek god thing, she is their boss. She is all these people's boss at this company that she started, but in a very, godlike way. She has the power to literally stop a person, pause a person, almost as if they are a movie. She can pause them, and that's what she did to Parker Posey's character. The mom literally presses pause on like her life, and then the servants come and like drag her out. And so that's kind of how I saw everything, is that
Wow.
Beau's mother is this sort of Greek god that, is just pissed about the ways in which he chooses to worship her, essentially. And that's kind of where I was at.
I think you cracked the nut.
But,
I think if someone's gonna do like an academic take of this movie, if it doesn't include that, I think they're missing what is in the essence of it, because that's essentially what I think you're right 100% on that. It's the only thing that makes sense, because she's a vengeful god, and Greek gods are pricks. So it makes complete sense to me, because this movie it also reminded me a lot of The Wall. Not only the concept album itself, but the movie that was made out of it. There's lots of Oedipal themes and a trial at the end, of course, which ends with the protagonist, being killed. But unlike The Wall, there is no, renewal of the cycle, because as that was an album, it was meant to loop infinitely, like a Mobius strip or something. But since this is a movie, we get that trial sequence. We like the audience and the amphitheater around him, the light that's shining a light on him, almost in like it's completely opposite of the actual projector in the theater you see this movie in. So that symbolism couldn't be more fucking obvious, that we, the audience, are watching him be executed in the same way that the audience in the movie are. We are them, they are us. And at the end, when they're just quietly milling out, as the water laps, on the sunken boat, that was fucking haunting. But at the same time, I was just like, what the fuck, Ari? What did I do to you? What did I do to you that you're going to condemn me for coming to your fucking movie about your fucking bullshit and try and like shame me for it? I don't think so, buddy. But that's what he did.
Yeah, that's exactly. I mean, I guess if you're to take anything from that ending, it's basically, it was all for naught, and everything that Beau thought, he could overcome and that he wasn't guilty of, he actually is guilty of it, and he cannot overcome it.
No.
And yeah, he's fucked. And so it's like everything for naught. And yeah, it's just, man, just so frustrating. And yeah, I think you were right. You're right about the light, the spotlight, and the people filing out, because that's exactly what that was. And so yeah, I think we cracked the case.
I think we did.
Mean, again, like you said, it really is easy to understand what's going on here, but just the way that it's all structured is so like, it's like purposefully obtuse, and it's kind of annoying in that way.
Yeah, because if you're gonna circle jerk with Ari, and smell his farts with him, yeah, you'll get the most that you can out of this movie. But is it worth it to agonize over what all this bullshit means? I don't think it is. I think at its simple, the simplest reading on it is the best one. I like the idea of this just being a Greek tragedy. Mm-hmm. But it's the Greek tragedy that every little Jewish boy gets to live with, apparently. Because, I don't know, like, and I know that you identified with certain aspects of it, and I certainly did too. But, like, once it really started getting into the whole, like, your dad died, like coming in me, making you, like, and that's why his balls are so like prominently swollen throughout the movie. That's when I'm just like, why are we talking about this, Ari? Like, what's going on, buddy? Come on, talk to me here. Give me a lifeline. But there's no lifeline, because the end of the movie is him just going like, no, you drown with me, and he like drags you down into the depths, so like there's no oxygen for you as an audience member when it's all over. But for a little bit there, I was happy for Beau when he was coming. I was happy when I was like, yeah, buddy, you did it. You didn't die. But then, yeah, the movie just keeps fucking going. And that's something that, like, I don't know, when you think about a movie that's really, really long or has a convoluted narrative, what serves it best is to have really, really well done sequences. That's why Pulp Fiction works, even though it broke all the rules. It was just that every single chunk of it was so effective. And that's what holds this movie back. There's only 1 out of 8 really lands perfectly. And all the others just trip over themselves. And is this going to derail his career, or is this just going to solidify his greatness?
Yeah, well, I think I like how you termed it in our Google Doc for the show. What the fuck does he do next? Because here's the thing: is you were nice enough to link all of his short films in a internet archive, and so I actually watched all of those in the lead up to this episode. And the thing that strikes me about Ari Aster at this point is I think that he was probably always this guy. This is always the filmmaker that he was, because if you look at his short films, they have more in common with this movie than they do either Hereditary or Midsommar. And to me, knowing that now, it's like I feel as if Hereditary and Midsommar were almost like him on the leash. Him with producers and studio financiers looking over his shoulder constantly, telling him to change stuff, telling him to cut stuff. And this is like him unleashed. And so I think this is the guy he always was. And this is what we're going to get from him going forward, I think.
No, there's a quote, because it's not even because those people were certainly there, the studio heads and the producers. But I found a quote where Aster basically conceded that making Hereditary instead of Beau, because that script has been around since like 2014, he went the direction he did. He says out of cynicism, he just knew it would be easier to make a horror movie, so he wrote one. So even from the genesis of those projects, it was him going, no, I can't make the wackadoo crazy shit I would love to do. So this is what I'll do instead. I think, I don't know what the expression is, but it's like where, there's where somebody doesn't reveal themselves completely, and then they've roped you in. So yeah, he sucked us all in with his really elevated and thoughtful rug pull. He's rug pulled his old audience, and now he's helicoptering his dick around in front of us, going, "Woo! Look at me! Here I am, Ari Aster. It's me!" And you're either traumatized by it, or you're like, "Hell yeah, it's Ari, yes!" But there's no in between. It's either you're into it or you're not. And hopefully, I don't know. Another person I thought of was Paul Thomas Anderson, who had some pretty straightforward debut, well respected, a way more successful follow-up that broadened his appeal, and then he was given the keys to the kingdom and the ability to be above any influence. And then he made the movie that is probably his most divisive. Magnolia is the one Paul Thomas Anderson movie that is the hardest to like for most people, but I love that movie. I've seen it as many times as I've seen Boogie Nights or The Master and Inherent Vice. But I am not going to come back to this one because there's really nothing for me to come back to. That's the conclusion ultimately that I think everyone in the theater I saw it with came back to. It was just it's like Men. I remember Men, that movie from last year. That's another one of these artsy experiences that really kind of just leave you going what, why, and being unsettled, I think, is the point. It's how did the movie make you feel, more important than did it change your worldview? But if a movie makes you understand yourself better, then it's probably done its job as a work of art. But this is not going to sell out a theater, and it's not going to make back the $40 million that A24 put into it, but they don't give a shit about that. This was about maintaining their brand, continuing to just let their freak flag fly, because traditional Hollywood would have never greenlit this thing. There's a reason why, he says it was out of cynicism, but it's because it was destined to be. This is the thing that he had to hold to his chest and wait until the checks were all signed and no one could tell him no anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same. This is a movie that I'm glad that I saw exactly one time, and it will remain that way. I don't see myself ever revisiting this. And I mean, there's a reason why, when you think back on it, there was that initial screening of this movie where they got a bunch of people together at the Alamo Draft House who thought they were going to go see Midsummer, and then they surprised them with this movie
on April 1st.
Yeah, on April 1st, and that was the first screening of this movie. And now you know exactly why they did that, because the people that are going to love this movie are going to love this movie, because they're like the Aster like diehards. And I just don't see myself revisiting it. It's already revealed all of its secrets. It's really not that complicated. I really don't think. And
this isn't David Lynch. It's not fun even. Like David Lynch is fun. Like I love a good surreal head trip, just like anybody else. But even like shit like Enter the Void is like a virtuoso cinematic experience from beginning to end, even though it's repulsive and ultimately pointless too. I'd much rather watch Enter the Void than watch this. But I think that's because Enter the Void is half as long.
Yeah.
And we come back to how fucking long this movie is. 2 hours, 59 minutes. Like why didn't he just give himself that extra minute? You're like, why not? What did he leave on the cutting room floor?
Yeah. Oh, I bet there's plenty, but yes, definitely agree. And yeah, we will, it's going to be interesting to see how this performs, because like you had mentioned, I think it did about 3 million this entire weekend, and that's when it went wide this weekend. And so it's definitely going to bomb, but I guess at the end of the day, it's all about, A24 keeping their sort of shiny veneer for all of the hipsters out there and whatnot. But I guess I'll just kind of leave it there.
Yeah, it's for the street cred. But yeah, if you're an Ari Aster fan, if you love Midsummer, if you love Hereditary, do yourself a favor, watch this man's short films first. Because like you pointed out, that is the real Ari Aster. And this movie will show you the real Ari Aster. And if you're okay with that, great, that's good. We're not opposed to that. But be sure to watch There's Something Strange About the Johnsons, and the original version of Beau. That was starring the late Billy Mayo. He was an actor that, for some reason, Aster really liked working with. And, he stands out quite a bit in those. But, yeah, that's all we really got to say about Beau is Afraid. Be very careful. Be very discerning. Or you might as well just waste your money and walk out of the theater. At least you got popcorn. What's your mentionable for this week?
Yeah, so real quick, we had a 2-day stretch here in the Minneapolis area where we had 80-degree days, and then we were plunged.
Bastards.
We were plunged back into the cold, harsh reality of spring after that. But I decided to take advantage of it. Got some last-minute tickets to a Minnesota Twins game, the local professional baseball team, and yeah, this is very fun. I mean, I guess my mentionable is just go to a baseball game if you can, because whether you like baseball or not, I don't know anything about baseball, and I really enjoyed myself, just taking in the sights and taking in the food and the game itself. Do you know about like the new pitch clock rule?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that because it actually the players hate it, but the fans love it. And as I understand it, they are now serving beer past the 7th inning. And that's scandalous.
Yeah, it was awesome because it made the game like a little over 2 hours, and it was incredible because there's very little downtime now, and I think that's kind of the thing that harms baseball games for the spectator sometimes, and I personally loved it. And it was just really, really nice to go see this. I mean, go to a professional game if you're lucky enough to be around a professional team, or go to a farm league team. They've got like the Red Hawks and
Minot's got the Hot Tots rolling out. Their mascot is literally a flaming tater tot. And,
okay, nice. That's awesome.
And my mascot at my high school growing up, at the Mott Regent High School, was the Wildfire, but our mascot was a flaming tater tot, and that's what we called him. So I think it's kind of hilarious that's what they're just the local college team. So it's like players who aren't good enough to like be on like the starter. Their homework for the summer is to go play for free. for one of these teams. Like, this is what they're doing for the summer. And they get boarded, and it's nothing special. But like, I used to run the camera for those things, and it was so fun to do that kind of thing. But baseball in general, you just got cold beer, you eat some food that's not good for you, and you get some sun. Like, what's not to love? I agree with you completely. I was in Fargo this weekend, and my mentionable is basically what I did this weekend in Fargo. Angie has a deep appreciation for author and crematorium, death, like new death advocate, Caitlin Doty, and North Dakota Humanities. They have this event called the Brave Talks. There was a lady from Dunseith who was a big booster of the humanities, and it's named after her. And I'm blanking on her name, but it's held once a year, and they get a speaker to go up, and they have a guided conversation. And I don't know if you've ever been to something like that, but you just sit at a table, and like your big celebrity host gets up top, and they do a little spiel, and then they invite you at the table to talk amongst yourselves about something. And in her talk, I don't know are you familiar with like what she does, like, or her books?
I wasn't before this week, but it's really weird. Just by complete coincidence, this woman was on one of the local newscasts here talking about this company that does like a new form of cremation.
Yeah, the hydrolysis method.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of what like her whole deal is. She's trying to find better, like, her question that we had to ask ourselves was, who gets to decide what happens to your body? Do you get to decide what happens with your body after you die? So like, I know you love 6 Feet Under, and so like, I think a lot of what was going on there was a lot, maybe what that show explored too, to a degree, but just like all these other options should be available technically, but it's like, are we cool with, just being, buried in a vault and, being reduced to ash? What about, the people in Malaysia who dig up their relatives and like, mummify them and then dress them up and hang around in the house with them for years? Because that's a normal thing for those people, and what are you comfortable with? Because those people maybe didn't want that to happen to them, but culturally it can be done. In Bowman, North Dakota, southwestern quarter, a guy was arrested for digging up a grave, which is a Class C felony. And but packaged in that is doing anything with a body beyond just burying and cremation. So like the North Dakota Catholic Conference is opposed to the hydrolysis method. They're opposed to human composting, which is also really cool because you get turned into a yard of soil that can be incorporated into like a garden or used to plant a tree. So it was illuminating. It was really, really interesting, actually, even though I knew for a fact I was the only person in that room who wasn't a card-carrying member of some political party. Like it still was welcoming and inviting. But it's the first time I'd seen a mask out in public in some time. But we kept on going in our weekend, and we also went to Burn Bombs for breakfast on the recommendation of Lane Johnson. Shout out to you, Lane, in Fargo there. Because we had the bagels there. I don't know if have you ever had them?
Yeah. It's a really, really great place. Their breakfast sandwiches are incredible. That
maple bacon schmear is wonderful. But the real treat was getting to commune with Eric Bradshaw at the worst. And I got to hear from him. I hadn't watched the episode yet, but Reel to Reel did an episode about artificial intelligence. The Fargonauts boys did a Reel to Reel about it. And God, Bradshaw hates that fucking movie. But I'll link it in the description so you can hear from the horse's mouth. But it was wonderful getting to see that dude again. There he is holding the legendary hamburger. She is a cat. What's your pick of the week?
Gosh, well, I mean, I think it's pretty easy. I would say, Evil Dead Rise, because, maybe I don't think this is something that we mentioned while we were doing our Beau is Afraid review, but Beau is Afraid is an impossible movie to recommend somebody. So I'm not going to recommend it to anyone, and I'm just going to say, go see Evil Dead Rise.
I will echo that completely for the same reason. Like, Lee Cronin did an excellent job. I was very impressed, and I feel like anybody, even my mom, even though she probably wouldn't be able to handle 5 minutes of this movie, would at least get more out of it than a second of Beau is Afraid. But that is our pick of the week. My puppy boy over here really has got to go pee. I apologize for his barking. But we are Theater and Stream, and we will be back next week, where we will be taking a break from theaters and movies, and we're going to dig into Citadel, a series coming at us on Amazon Prime. If you have that, you can watch it with us, and then we'll let you know if we think you should keep going, and we will be. But thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for watching, everybody. I got to go walk my dog.
See ya.
Take care.